Hello, greetings from beautiful Westmeath. I'm Philip Roseman, Professor of Philosophy and Head of the Philosophy Department at Maynooth University. Given the fact that this year the university cannot, for obvious reasons, hold its usual open day physically on campus, I've decided to record this brief video in order to try to give you some impression of what studying philosophy at Maynooth might be like, and to give you some ideas as to what one can do with philosophy in one's life. So I'll start with a more general remark that is not just relevant to philosophy but to one's choice of university studies more generally. I would like to encourage you to choose a subject for which you are really talented and about which you feel passionate. I know that it's very important for everyone to earn money. That applies even to philosophy professors. We all need to make a living. Nonetheless, I would suggest that you choose your subject not only in light of the question of how easy it will be to get a job and perhaps how much you will earn in that job, because don't forget that the career which you choose will have to sustain you for a very long time, for decades, for your whole life. Which means that income is wonderful and, in fact, indispensable. But it's even more wonderful if you have income earning for work in an area in which you are genuinely interested, for which you have talents, and about which you feel passionate. So I would encourage you to pursue your passions, even if doing that might require a little bit more effort than going a more straightforward route. So that's the first remark with which I would like to start, which is, of course, somewhat relevant to philosophy, because philosophy is not a mainstream subject. Philosophy is a subject that only a minority of students typically choose each year. But so, what is philosophy? Well, there are different ways of approaching it and of defining it, obviously, but I'll give you a simple way of defining philosophy. The simple way is to say that philosophy asks the questions that every human being wants to ask and is interested in, but doesn't have the time and sometimes doesn't have the courage to ask. I'll give you some examples. We all want to know what a happy life is. What kind of life is going to give us happiness? We're wondering, what is love really? What is it? Is there a God? If there is a God, why is there so much evil? Why is there so much suffering? These are some of the questions philosophers ask. They also ask other questions that are perhaps a little bit less existential and already more abstract. So, for example, a philosopher wouldn't simply listen to a piece of music, whether it's Beethoven or Tupac. A philosopher would ask, well, what is it that makes this music attractive? What is it that makes it beautiful? And then a philosopher would make the next step and ask not only what makes a beautiful piece of music, which is already a difficult question, because consider that both Beethoven and Tupac and many others have composed beautiful pieces. So what is beauty in music? But then the philosopher would even go a step further and say, well, what is beauty generally? In a piece of music, in a face, in a landscape, in a poem, etc., etc. These are just a few examples of philosophical questions. Now, if you take the more existential questions I mentioned just a minute ago, such as what is happiness, what is love, is there a God? These are questions that I think are at the back of the minds of really everyone. Most people, however, what shall I say, perhaps don't have the courage, don't take the time to pursue these questions. I will tell you a little anecdote that a philosophy student shared with me a few years ago. After starting to study philosophy in Maynooth, he came up to me after class, up to the front, and said, well, I'm so glad that I found that other people are asking these questions. When I raised them with my friends at the pub, they always said, well, shut up, have another pint. Not that these other people were not interested in these questions, but they made them uncomfortable. So the philosopher is the one who is not easily made uncomfortable, who is also willing to accept the fact that some of these questions don't have easy answers, in the sense that in your first semester you're going to learn what the nature of a happy human life is. No, that's not going to happen. That's a task for a whole life. But if you're interested in embarking on these questions, in facing this task, which is going to change your life, then philosophy would be for you. So if philosophy is about asking fundamental questions about really every area of life, how does one study it? Answer: not simply by a bunch of people getting together and starting to talk, because these people would not be particularly qualified. They would not know more than the proverbial man or woman in the street. So what one does in philosophy is that one reads the texts of great philosophers who have tried to answer these questions in the past, in order to acquire the kind of knowledge that the philosophical tradition has already reached. So philosophy consists in reading texts, interpreting texts. Interpreting means, well, trying to find out what they're actually trying to say, since these texts are sometimes difficult. But then, of course, also reading them critically and discussing them, because the fact that a great philosopher wrote something 2,000 years ago or 20 years ago, the fact that this person was a great author doesn't mean it's true. It means that it's an interesting thought, that it's worth considering. But philosophical ideas have to be weighed up. They have to be examined critically. So studying philosophy means reading a lot, discussing, writing, thinking. In Maynooth, philosophy is not available as a single honor subject, but it's always combined with another subject. Now one could say that's a pity. Why can I not study philosophy just on its own? Well, but there's also an advantage to this. The advantage is that combining philosophy with another subject allows you to bring the philosophical method, the philosophical questions, to bring that to bear on another subject in which you're interested. The other subject is, you can choose the other subject from a broad range of possibilities. You can choose certainly English or poetry, studying poetry, but you can also do business. You can do biology. You can do computer science. By combining philosophy with another subject, you choose to acquire knowledge of this first subject, but then also to acquire the ability to think about that subject perhaps more deeply or more philosophically. Example, let's say you study computer science, then you would acquire all the knowledge that is necessary to be a computer scientist, the mathematical basis, the writing of software, etc., etc. But you would also then ask philosophical questions about the digital revolution. What are the implications for us as human beings and for society of interacting with each other increasingly by digital means and not physically? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Should there be limits to the digitization of society? Those would be philosophical questions. And that is a relevant question is, I think, something that one can see in the current crisis. Even if you are something of a loner, some people are, you will probably find it difficult to stay at home all the time, not being able to get, not so much not to chat with other people, because we are able to chat with other people over the internet or over the telephone, not being able to meet them physically. So what is it about human beings that we want to meet other people in the flesh, which is something digital devices don't allow? So finally, once you graduate, what does one do with philosophy? Well, there are essentially two career paths. One is an academic career path. That is to say, it's the career path that leads you to becoming a philosopher. You would then do a master. You would continue your studies at the master's level and at the PhD level, and try to land a job at a university in Ireland, the UK, continental Europe, or even further afield. There are such jobs, as you can see from my own example and from the example of other intellectuals who work in philosophy departments at universities all over the world. It's not an easy career path, though. That is to say, you would not then, after 3 years of study, graduate and immediately have reasonable income, but you would have a scholarship, and you would have to invest considerable energy over many years in order to become a full-time professional philosopher. The other career path arises when you do combine philosophy with another subject. So you could become somebody working in the field of technology with a particular ability to think philosophically. Or you could be someone running a business who thinks more critically, more deeply about what is involved in running a business. Indeed, and I'm not joking, why couldn't you be a farmer who lives and works in his or her community, bringing philosophy to that community, apart from bringing it to his or her own life? So you see, philosophy can be practiced in any number of ways. So I hope you found this video informative. I hope it has answered at least some of your questions. If you would like to talk further about the possibility of studying philosophy, do not hesitate to send me an email. You can reach me at philip.roseman@mu.ie. And don't forget to spell that correctly, because as you may have gathered from this video, I'm German. All the best now, and good luck. Bye-bye.